Hello and welcome to this episode of Trash to Track. In this episode I'm going to be looking at this Bachmann Motor luggage van, or MLV, that's been sent in for a service by Nick along with several other trains. Now this has got a bit of a rattle to it, not quite sure what's going on there, so we'll have to open it up and have a look. I'm giving it a battery test, see if this works. Now Nick says these have been in storage for quite some time, that's why he sent them over to be fully serviced back to running order. Trying it on the battery test, there's no life in it whatsoever. So we're going to open it up. Now to open up one of these single car units, there are 4 screws, one in each corner of the cab, just as indicated. And then once the screws are removed, using a thumbnail or cocktail stick, you prise the body shell off the clips and it will just lift away. So just like so. And there we have a motor block. No interior detailing, as this is a parcels coach. And there is actually a DCC decoder fitted, and that rattling around was this speaker that's loose. There's no speaker surround, but it was rattling around loose in there. So that isn't a sound chip, that is a Soundtracks decoder. So I'm going to remove that and test the motor on that in a bit. So it is a pretty simple setup. You can see this big die casting here holds the motor, and it drives a single bogie at the front here. So I'm going to drop that out and have a look. There's quite a bit of old oil on the bottom, a lot of hair and fluff around the axles. So it does need a service, it does need some work on it. Now to remove the bogie, same with most Bachmann diesel electric locos, you undo the screw on the top here, and the drive bogie just drops out along with the drive shaft. And there's the pickup system. It picks up through the axles and presses on those brass plates, which were quite greasy, so everything's going to need a clean up. And as you can see there, there's quite a lot of hair and fluff around these axles. So I'm just going to pop the bogie frame off. Very simple. And again, more hair and fluff. And you can see the drivetrain there, and all this grease, the original Bachmann grease, has gone very tacky. It's like wax, that's horrible. So I'm going to have to remove all of that so that the drivetrain's free to move. So I'm going to have to take the wheels out and give this a thorough cleaning. And that happens, it's very common with Bachmann grease. It's not been used for a while. It's been in storage, it's thickened up. Now these brass parts here are pickups. They pick up from brass inserts on the axle. Very good idea. I've got several of these units that Bachmann have made, and they're all reliable runners. So I'm going to pop the worm gear cover off, because no doubt that's got some solidified grease in it as well. So I'm just going to pop that off. When it unclips, that reveals the worm gear. And yeah, all that orange grease, the oil's going slightly green, so it's going to need a thorough clean. And now what I do, I'm not taking the bogie apart completely. I'm going to use a cocktail stick. First thing I did though was clean the wheels with a cotton bud of meths and clean the wheel backs and the axles to remove any grease off these. The wheels weren't too bad. There was some slight build-up of dirt, but not too bad at all. It was mainly just old lubrication on the insides. So once all the wheels were clean, I get my long nose pliers and pull all that hair and fluff off the axles there. And then using a toothpick, I'm going to get rid of all of this orange grease, or as much of it as I can. And then just wipe it on this bit of blue tissue paper I've got here. There was an awful lot of this grease, and it was all going solid. So it wouldn't have been long, another year or so in storage, and this would have solidified completely, I reckon, because that grease was just drying out. Once I'd got as much grease off it as I could, I gave it a blast out with the WD-40 contact cleaner and then set it aside to dry. That really is good stuff, that WD-40. Just wipe off any excess grease or any excess cleaner. And then, like I said, that was set aside to fully evaporate. And I'm going to turn my attention to the chassis of the unit. So all that grease is gone now. That's what I'm just showing you there. That grease is gone. So I'm going to turn my attention to the chassis now. I'm going to remove this, the 4 screws that hold this motor housing in place, because I need to get to those brass contacts just to clean them up. And also want to have a look in here, make sure there's no fluff and gunk all wrapped around the motor shaft and the flywheel. So lifting that up gently, just fold it backwards on the wires. There's the motor. Yeah, there's a bit of old lubrication and that in there. That will all need cleaning. So using a cotton bud and meths again, I'm just going to clean those brass contact pads, get rid of all this old grease that's on there and old oil, just to make sure that there's good conductivity between the parts, because the pickup parts on the bogie just rest on these, or these rest on the bogie should I say, and that's what transfers current from the wheels to the motor. So clean that up, and then I'm going to clean all that horrible gunk. You can see there's a massive hair wrapped around the flywheel. So I'm going to remove all that, give that a thorough tidying up, and again, cocktail stick comes to the rescue to pick out all the old grease that's solidifying inside the cup of the flywheel. Once that's all done, I remove the false floor by removing these 2 small, and when I say small, they are minute screws. So I'm going to remove these 2, and this false floor will lift up. What I'm doing is I'm looking for the speaker terminals, because I'm going to solder that speaker in place, because Nick does intend on sound fitting this in the future. And when I lift the floor up, a little bit dusty, but the speaker terminals are there in the middle of the PCB, just there where my finger is. So I'm going to solder the speaker to the PCB for him. Now to do that, I'm going to thread the speaker wires through the gap in the false floor, and then just with a tiny bit of solder, just touch the wires onto the pads, and then put the false floor back in. Now you will see that I fit the speaker without the housing on. It's because when I was doing this, I didn't think the housing was included. I thought Nick had forgot it, or was going to buy an off the market, an off the shelf product aftermarket thing. But the speaker housing was actually in the box, and I had missed it. So when I'd done this rebuild, I do actually go back and put the proper speaker housing on, and then screw it into place properly. But I didn't do that because I'd finished filming at that point. But once the speaker wires have been soldered onto the PCB, the false floor is put back in, and then the 2 minute screws are screwed back in and holds everything in place. Now while we've been doing that, the contact cleaner is all evaporated off the drive bogie. So now I can put some fresh lubrication in there. You can see there in the drivetrain it is completely clean. So using some Lebel 106, I'm just going to squeeze a small amount of grease onto all those drive gears there. And then I'm also going to add a small amount of oil onto the spindles, because the spindles sit there and rotate, or allow the gears to rotate, so they want some lubrication, so a tiny drop of oil on those won't hurt. So there we go, just using this Fleischmann pin dropper to put oil on those gear spindles. So once that's done, the newly cleaned wheels are then put in place, and when you put these in place, the bearings clip into place on the motor bogie, and then you have to line up those pickup brasses into the slots on the outside of the bearings. That one there hasn't gone in quite right, so I'm just making some adjustment. It is imperative you get this right, otherwise the model just won't pick up any current. So just help with a screwdriver there, just helping it to form into place. And then it's clipped in with the pickups resting on the axles. So I do the same to the other side, so both wheels are in. Add a small amount of oil to the bearings on the worm gear, because again all this was cleaned off, so this is dry now, so it does need some fresh lubrication. I did add a tiny bit of Lebel 106 to that worm as well, and then the worm gear cover can go back on. And this was also thoroughly cleaned with a cotton bud and mess, just to remove any old lubrication from the inside. And that is the drive bogie pretty much cleaned, serviced and re-lubricated, ready to fit back onto the model. One of the last things to do is to clip the bogie frame back on. You do have to be careful with these bogie frames, there's a lot of detail on that's easily damaged. And then once that's on, it's a case of lining up the drive shafts, or drive shaft, putting it in the cup, lining the top retaining screw to the hole in the die-cast motor housing, replacing the screw, and that is the MLV fully serviced. Now I know it's probably not to everybody's cup of tea, this. Very, very simple thing to do, but that build-up of hair, fibre and that solidifying grease would have stopped this model from running in the future. So I'm just going to put it on this bit of test track, and there we go, it's moving very nicely. The body shell will only go back on one way. There is a representation of the battery compartments of this unit without any windows in. That goes where the die-cast motor block is, and you have to be careful because the light towers slot in tiny gaps in the cab there. So just exactly the opposite of how we took it off. Clip the body shell in place, making sure we're not trapping any wires or anything. So I'm just putting that speaker wire back in there. Body shell clips down, and then those 4 screws we removed earlier are replaced. Now, as I mentioned, there's a lot of fine detail on the bottom of this model, so don't push down on it and break any of it. You need to be very careful putting the body shell back on. And as I mentioned, this unit's got battery boxes. That's because in real life, these units were third rail powered, but they also had onboard batteries for driving on non-electrified sidings, which was a novel feature back in the day, I'd imagine. So here I am just putting those 4 screws back in, and yeah, a very quick, very easy really service and rebuild. These Bachmann third rail units really are nice. They are becoming quite pricey now though. When I bought mine, they were relatively cheap for what they were. And like I say, it's not everybody's cup of tea. It is slightly boring, single car, non-passenger unit, but it is a nice model all the same. Now, along with the MLV, Nick also sent a couple of other things for me to service. The first thing was this Kernel bullied diesel. This was just another simple service, very similar to a Bachmann setup. Centrally drive motor to the bogie tails and flywheels, etc. So this was given a thorough clean and re-lubrication, and then tested its paces on the layout. Very unusual looking diesel. Again, very nice though, southern bullied thing. And the other thing was this Bachmann thumper. Now I'm going to stop now and let you listen to this, because this was just given a thorough service, but this sounds absolutely brilliant. So I'll stop talking now and let you watch this run round. What a very nice model that thumper is. And again, like I said, just a thorough clean and service for that model too. If you've got anything you'd like to see featured in a future episode of Trash to Track, if you've got anything that needs repairing, DCC fitting or donating, please email me at dansmodelrailways@gmail.com. Have a look again, it's sent over, and who knows, it may even feature in an episode all of its own. So I'll leave you now with some shots of the MLV running around the layout before I get all these packed up and sent back to Nick. Thank you so much for watching Trash to Track again. Please like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Bye for now.